Malik Jamison, 13, was just the janitor's son. No uniform, no badge, no one even learned his name. But the day the Grandmaster's flight was delayed, and a crowd of elites needed a filler, they pointed to him, broom in hand. They laughed when he sat down, until he made his first move. What no one knew was that Malik had been watching their games in silence for years, memorizing every opening from a closet with no board, just bottle caps and cardboard. And now, in one quiet breath, he was about to checkmate everything they thought they knew. Would they realize it before it was too late? Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. On the hill just north of Greenville's wealthiest neighborhood sat Crestmore Preparatory Academy, where the elite raised their sons to conquer. With halls lined in oil portraits, and libraries older than the state, Crestmore wasn't just a school, it was a lineage. In places like that, names opened doors, and if you didn't have the right name, you didn't even get a key. 13-year-old Malik Jamison knew that. He walked the halls daily, not as a student, but as a shadow. His mother, Loretta, had cleaned classrooms at Crestmore for 8 years. She was paid to mop up privilege, to wipe chalk dust off desks where legacy kids doodled chessboards in the margins, joked about early admission to Yale, and debated whether to practice with their private tutors, or just skip it altogether. Malik was different. He came through the side entrance with his mother at 6:15 a.m. and left with her after sunset. Between scrubbing toilets and refilling paper towels, he would linger outside the chess club room, never daring to step inside. Inside that room, boys with pressed uniforms and names like Tucker Dane and Spencer Lowell III played under the gaze of Coach Norris, a retired international master, whose intolerance for sloppy players was only matched by his inability to learn Malik's name. "You," he once said, pointing vaguely when Malik delivered a misplaced package. "Leave it and go." So Malik went. Always. But not before watching. Not before absorbing. Every afternoon, once his chores were done, Malik would sneak into the janitor's closet across from the chess room. The slatted door let him see everything without being seen. He didn't own a chessboard, so he memorized the games, move by move. Coach Norris called out squares like a conductor leading an orchestra. Knight to f6, bishop e5, rook to d1. And Malik, crouched on overturned mop buckets, echoed them silently in his mind. At night, when his mother fell asleep on the couch, Malik would pull out a sheet of scrap cardboard and draw 64 squares with a marker. Then, using bottle caps and coins, he'd replay every match from memory. When he made a mistake, he'd start over and over. For 2 years, no one knew. Because no one asked. Because at Crestmore, Malik wasn't seen. But that changed the day the storm hit. It was the annual Spring Invitational, where schools from across the region sent their brightest chess stars to compete for trophies, scholarships, and headlines. The auditorium was packed. Lights were bright. Parents in silk scarves and sports jackets filled the front rows. Local press hovered near the stage, waiting for the arrival of the guest of honor, Grandmaster Victor Lang, the cold-eyed, twice-decorated champion from Eastern Europe. Malik had been assigned to sweep the hall before the matches began. He moved quietly, sweeping under folding chairs, when a security staffer waved him off the floor. "Clear out, the Grandmaster's coming any minute," the man said without looking at him. Malik nodded and backed away, gripping the broom like a shield. But Lang never came. The storm had grounded his flight, and Crestmore's organizers were in panic mode. The guest of honor had been slotted to play an exhibition match, a traditional face-off to open the tournament with flair. Now, without him, the schedule was in disarray. In the side room where participants were warming up, Coach Norris stormed in, his face blotchy with stress. "We need someone to fill in. Just for the opener," he muttered to the other coaches. "Doesn't have to be good. Just someone to sit across the board and smile." None of the tournament players volunteered. Too much risk. Who wants to be the filler, the one known for losing in under 10 moves? That's when the tournament director, Mrs. Delacroix, looked out across the hall. Everyone else was occupied. Players, judges, guests. Everyone, except a small boy near the janitor's closet, broom in hand, staring quietly toward the stage. "Who's that?" she asked. Coach Norris scoffed. "That's the help's son. Can he play?" she asked. "I highly doubt he even knows how." Delacroix ignored him. "Hey," she called out, pointing at Malik. "You ever played chess before?" Malik froze. It felt like a trick. Everyone was looking now. The hall grew quiet. Loretta, wiping down the vending machine, turned her head slowly, confusion on her face. Malik took a breath, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice steady. "I have." Coach Norris laughed. "He's joking. Don't waste time." But Delacroix raised a hand. "We're out of options." And just like that, a folding chair was pulled out. Malik was ushered onto the stage, lights blinding him. His shirt was wrinkled, shoes scuffed, pants too short at the ankles. No badge, no school crest, just a kid in Goodwill gear, sitting at a table reserved for kings. The crowd murmured. Some chuckled. Others frowned. "What is this? A mascot moment?" Someone whispered. Malik didn't speak. He didn't fidget. He didn't blink. He stared at the board. Years of hidden practice surged through him. Every line, every counter, every sacrifice. His heart thundered, but his mind was quiet. Then, in the silence, Mrs. Delacroix cleared her throat and leaned toward the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "in lieu of our guest Grandmaster, Crestmore would like to honor one of our own. Someone who's been watching from the sidelines far too long." Malik's fingers hovered over the board. "He may not have a uniform," she continued, "but today he plays." And as the rain lashed the windows and silence gripped the room, Malik reached out and made the first move. Bishop to G5, a line no one expected from a boy who was never taught the rules. The storm outside grew worse. Rain hammered the windows in steady bursts, thunder rumbling behind the walls of Crestmore's grand auditorium. On stage, the overhead lights reflected off the polished mahogany table, as chess pieces stood neatly arranged in rows, white and black, waiting for war. When Grandmaster Victor Lang finally entered through the side door, the room seemed to inhale. The man had a presence that demanded silence. His silver-gray hair was slicked back, his suit pressed like armor. Every student in the front row straightened, cameras turned toward him, flashes bouncing off the banners that read Crestmore Spring Invitational. Tradition leaves here. Lang gave a curt nod to the staff before his eyes fell on the boy already seated at the board. His brow creased. The boy wasn't wearing a uniform. No embroidered crest on his blazer. No polished loafers. Just a faded gray shirt, sleeves rolled up, shoes scuffed from years of being passed down. The contrast was almost cinematic. The European champion in his tailored suit versus the janitor's son who didn't belong on the stage. Lang turned to the director, his accent sharp and deliberate. "Is this a joke?" A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the audience. Parents whispered behind their programs. One student snorted under his breath, the sound loud in the silence. Mrs. Delacroix cleared her throat. "Our scheduled exhibition player was unable to arrive. This young man," she glanced at the clipboard as if unsure whether to read the name, "Malik Jameson, will stand in as a demonstration player." Lang's lips curved into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "A demonstration," he repeated. "Yes, fitting." The audience laughed again, the kind of laughter meant to sting. Malik heard every note of it. He didn't speak. He simply placed his small hands on either side of the board, fingers resting lightly on the table's edge. He had never played on a stage, never under lights this bright. His throat was dry, and his heartbeat pulsed through his fingertips. But he remembered what his mother told him before she left for her second job that morning. "Keep your head down, but don't lower your eyes." So he didn't. He looked directly at Lang. Lang seemed to sense the challenge. He leaned forward, folding his hands. "You know how to move the pieces, yes?" "Yes, sir," Malik said quietly. "Good," Lang chuckled, shaking his head. "Then perhaps this will be quick." From the audience, Tucker Dane, Crestmore's own chess prodigy, grinned from the front row. He whispered to Spencer Lowell, "He'll last 5 moves, tops." The boys stifled laughter. Mrs. Delacroix gave a signal, and the clock was set. 2 digital timers blinked red, one for each player. Lang reached out with a perfectly steady hand and moved his pawn to e4. Smooth, precise, confident. The crowd leaned forward as Malik's turn began. But he didn't move right away. He stared at the board, studying the position, letting silence stretch into discomfort. Lang tapped a finger impatiently on the table. "What's the delay?" he said lightly, his tone laced with condescension. "Not every pawn gets to play a king." The line drew another low ripple of laughter from the audience. Malik said nothing. Inside, something hardened. Years of quiet humiliation. The missed lunch breaks. The way teachers handed him trash instead of praise. The constant whisper of "you don't belong here." All settled into a single cold resolve. His hand lifted, steady despite the tremor in his chest. He moved his pawn, not forward one square like everyone expected, but diagonally into a position rarely seen in early play. It was precise, defiant, and deliberate. Lang blinked. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Coach Norris squinted from the sidelines, trying to identify the line. It wasn't random. It wasn't reckless. It was unusual. Malik's inner voice whispered every move he'd memorized from years of hiding behind that janitor's closet door. He knew Lang's patterns, the overconfident openings, the aggressive exchanges. Malik had seen men like him before. People who believed genius only came in certain colors. Lang smirked, masking the flicker of surprise. "Clever," he said softly. "Did the cleaning staff teach you that one?" The words hit like a slap. But Malik didn't flinch. He only adjusted his seat, eyes steady. "Your move," he said. The audience murmured again, this time louder. Tucker crossed his arms. "He's acting all smart," he whispered. "But wait until Lang crushes him." Lang moved quickly, his hand slicing through the air. He tried to corner Malik's opening, to force an early trade, but Malik countered quiet, fast, and methodical. The rhythm built. Piece after piece slid across the board, clicking softly in the heavy silence. With each exchange, Lang's smirk thinned. The boy wasn't playing randomly. He was building something. From the back, Loretta appeared at the auditorium door, still wearing her gray cleaning uniform. She wasn't supposed to be there, but word had spread through the staff halls. Her boy was on stage. She stood frozen in the doorway, mop handle clutched in both hands, eyes wide as her son faced the man everyone worshipped. Minutes passed. The room's laughter faded into unease. Lang shifted in his chair, tugging at his cufflinks. Malik had trapped him into a defense that shouldn't have existed this early in the game. Coach Norris muttered under his breath, "That's impossible." Lang noticed it too late. His bishop was pinned. His knight, trapped. The child had cornered him in a position that forced him into retreat. A humiliation in front of dozens of cameras. He leaned forward. "You rehearsed this, didn't you? Someone told you what I'd play." "No one told me," Malik said. "I just listened." Lang's expression shifted, from arrogance to calculation. He wasn't used to being embarrassed, especially not by someone Crestmore didn't even consider part of their student body. He countered hard. 2 sharp exchanges later, Malik lost a pawn. The crowd exhaled with relief. Lang smiled again, but this time his confidence was brittle. He spoke softly, but everyone heard him. "This is the difference between those born to play and those who only watch." Malik met his gaze. "You talk too much for someone running out of moves." Gasps erupted from the front row. Tucker muttered, "Did he just—" Lang's jaw tightened. "We'll see how long your luck lasts." Piece by piece, the tempo accelerated. Malik's strategy, slow, defensive, surgical, began to coil around Lang's aggression like a trap closing in. Each move was a whisper from all those nights replaying games on cardboard. Every countermove was a protest against being invisible, against being dismissed. Then came the twist no one expected. Lang leaned forward to execute what should have been a simple capture. But as his fingers touched the piece, he froze. His eyes darted to the corner of the board. Malik's last move had set up a fork, threatening both his queen and his rook. Lang had walked into it. The silence was absolute. For the first time in his career, Victor Lang looked unsure. Malik didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He only said, "Your move, sir." Loretta pressed her hand to her mouth at the back of the room. Lang took a slow breath, recomposing himself. "You've memorized tricks," he said, voice lower now. "But you can't win without instinct. Maybe instinct comes from being ignored long enough." Malik replied. Lang's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in recognition. He was beginning to see what the audience already did. This wasn't luck. This boy was real. He made his move, a bold counter that shifted the dynamic again. The crowd leaned forward, unsure of what they were watching anymore. A humiliation or a miracle. The storm outside roared louder, lightning flashing through the auditorium windows. Malik studied the board one last time, and something in his expression changed. Calm settled over him, the kind of calm that comes when a moment you've dreamed of your entire life finally arrives. He reached forward, his fingers brushing the pawn. The camera zoomed in. Lang's breath caught. Then Malik made his move. A rare centuries-old opening transition. No one in the room, not even Victor Lang himself, had ever seen from a player his age, or his color. The room went still. The move Malik had just played, pawn to c4, wasn't just unusual. It was elite. An obscure transposition, buried deep in chess theory, known as the English Botvinnik variation, used by strategists who favored slow burn attacks and complex positional battles. It was the kind of line taught in quiet corners of university chess labs, or whispered between masters, not something you pulled from an after-school club, certainly not something expected from a boy in second-hand sneakers and a wrinkled shirt. Whispers turned to stunned silence. Even Lang's lips parted slightly. He didn't speak, but the shift in his posture was loud enough. The Grandmaster had just been jolted out of autoplay. At the back of the room, behind the glass doors that separated staff from spectacle, Loretta Jameson stood frozen, one hand still clutching the mop handle. She hadn't moved in minutes. The janitor's cart sat quietly beside her, a rag draped over the handle like an afterthought. She'd been mid-wipe on the vending machine when she heard the silence fall. Now she stood like a statue, not daring to blink. She'd never seen her son like this. Malik's fingers returned to his lap, his posture calm, his face unreadable. He didn't smirk or flinch. He didn't acknowledge the soundless reaction from the crowd. Because for him, this was never about spectacle. This was survival. Lang finally made his move. A safe one. Defensive. He was feeling Malik out now. No longer trying to finish the match quickly, but probing for weaknesses. He found none. Malik countered instantly, returning fire with a bishop deployment that doubled down on his opening. The boy was carving out space on the board in a way that left no room for error. His every move was patient, strategic, and oddly quiet. And yet with each piece he touched, the energy in the room shifted more violently. From the audience, Coach Norris leaned forward. His arms were crossed, jaw clenched. He'd spent years training Crestmore's elite players, teaching them theory from textbooks older than Malik. And now that same theory was unfolding on stage, one line at a time, from a kid he had never even let into the chess room. How does he know that line? He whispered to no one in particular. Tucker Dane overheard him. He sat 2 rows up, arms folded tightly across his chest. His leg bounced rapidly under his chair. That's not possible, Tucker muttered. He's just copying something he saw online. But even he didn't sound convinced. On stage, Lang cleared his throat. His voice, once laced with disdain, now held a note of curiosity. You've studied, he said, nodding toward the board. Not just tactics. Theory. Old theory. Russian theory. Malik didn't respond. Lang smiled tightly. You know this line was used in the 1959 candidates tournament, yes? Tal versus Petrosian. Malik met his eyes. I know. The room murmured again.
Lang chuckled, leaning back in his chair. What kind of child knows that line?
Malik's voice was low but firm, one who wasn't invited to play but learned anyway. Lang's smile faded. Somewhere in the back row, Emily Carr, the only biracial student on Crestmore's team, lowered her phone. Her recording paused mid-shot. Her face held something new. Not pity, but respect. She whispered to her friend beside her, I think we're watching something bigger than a game. Lang made another move. Then another. He tried to force exchanges, simplify the board, a tactic that worked against players who relied on flash and surprise. But Malik didn't take the bait. He declined trades, preserved tension, forced Lang to wrestle with complications. The Grandmaster was beginning to sweat. Not visibly, not dramatically, but in subtle ways. The tight grip on his rook, the way he pressed his lips between moves, the sudden flick of his eyes toward the clock. His usual tempo, fast, precise, was cracking. Malik, meanwhile, remained unshaken. This wasn't just about the board anymore. This was about the years he sat in silence, cleaning up crumbs after these same players left their matches, laughing at inside jokes about his mother. This was for the time he brought a borrowed chess book to school, and had it taken away by a teacher who said, "This isn't for your level," for the time someone wrote Pawn Boy on his locker, not even knowing he didn't have one. Every piece he moved now was layered with memory. The audience didn't know it, but they were watching a protest, each pawn a small rebellion. Lang finally tried to break through with a central thrust, advancing his queen into open space. It was bold, flashy, a move made to intimidate. Malik responded instantly, a pin with his bishop that locked Lang's queen in place and exposed his king's position. The crowd exhaled sharply. Someone clapped once, then stopped, unsure if they were allowed to. Coach Norris rubbed his temple. Lang narrowed his eyes. This isn't memorization, he muttered under his breath, loud enough for Malik to hear. This is something else. Malik said nothing. Lang looked up at Mrs. Delacroix, who stood near the curtain with arms folded, eyes wide, then back at Malik. He was losing narrative control. And he knew it. The cameras still rolled. Every outlet in the room had shown up to write puff pieces about Cressmore's superiority, a champion visiting the crown jewel of Southern prep academies, sparring with a top player. Instead, the only headline writing itself now was Custodian's son shocks Grandmaster. Lang sat back and took a long breath. You're not playing to win, he said. Malik tilted his head. Aren't I? Lang shook his head. You're playing to be seen. The words weren't a compliment. They were a threat wrapped in an observation. The kind of thing older men said to black boys when their competence became inconvenient. And Malik knew it. He leaned forward slightly. Maybe you're playing not to lose. For the first time in Lang's career, he looked just briefly rattled. In the back of the room, Loretta finally moved. She reached up slowly, pressing her palm to the glass, as if trying to anchor herself to something real. The boy she raised, who once begged her for a dollar store chessboard, was sitting center stage, making men with metal sweat. And for the first time, people were watching him not with pity, but with awe. Then came the unexpected twist. Malik touched upon one he'd advanced 4 moves ago, nearly forgotten. Everyone thought it was a decoy. But now, he pushed it again. It slipped forward like a whisper. Now 1 step from promotion. Lang's eyes widened. He'd missed it. In his focus on the center, he'd overlooked the edge of the board, where Malik had built a quiet threat, waiting. The Grandmaster's queen was out of position. His knight couldn't intercept. His rook was too far to stop it. And now Malik's pawn stood ready, 1 square from turning into a queen. The room exploded in whispers. Coach Norris rose from his seat. That's... Lang's hand hovered over the board. You're forcing promotion. Malik nodded. Unless you sacrifice your bishop. It wasn't arrogance. It was inevitability. Lang leaned forward, no longer smirking. For the first time he looked like what he was, a man realizing he wasn't just being challenged by a child. He was being outplayed by someone he was never taught to respect. And all around him, the illusion of control was crumbling. Lang's hand moved to block the pawn, but paused midway, eyes scanning the board. As he realized too late, this wasn't going to be an easy win. They called it a fluke. The whispers began before the applause from Malik's match with Lang had even faded. Coaches and parents huddled in corners, rationalizing the impossible. Maybe Lang was being gracious. Maybe the Grandmaster let the boy win to build goodwill for the school. Maybe he was distracted, tired, jet-lagged, anything but what their eyes had seen. But inside the tournament bracket, facts didn't bend to feelings. Malik Jamieson had earned his next round, and his next opponent was the school's pride and joy, Tucker Dane. Tucker, with his strawberry blonde hair slicked into place and his monogrammed blazer freshly pressed, was the embodiment of Crestmore perfection. Son of a wealthy surgeon and a district court judge, Tucker had been playing chess since he was 4. At 8 he graced the cover of Southern Youth Chess Monthly. At 10 he had a private tutor flown in from Germany. He wasn't just talented, he was expected to win, and he hated surprises. When the tournament director posted the pairings and Tucker saw Malik's name listed beside his, a sharp laugh escaped his lips, loud enough for the crowd around him to hear. "Pawn boy?" he scoffed. "They're really putting him against me." The other players chuckled nervously, unsure whether to join in. Spencer Lowell, Tucker's longtime friend and doubles partner, leaned closer. "Careful," Spencer murmured. "He beat Lang." Tucker waved him off. Lang was being polite. "Besides, this one's mine. Always has been." The implication lingered. Not just that Malik was beatable, but that he was owned by the system, by the students, by his place in the building. Even if he sat at the same board, he was never really allowed to win. As they stepped onto the stage for round 2, the auditorium was fuller than ever. Students packed the aisles. Parents edged closer with phones raised. Everyone wanted to see if lightning could strike twice, or if the storm had passed. Malik approached the table with the same quiet grace as before. No smile, no fidgeting, just presence. He didn't scan the room, didn't look for his mother or for approval. He only looked at the board. Tucker slouched in his chair like he was waiting for a waiter to take his order. Well, Tucker drawled. "Look who graduated from cleaning to competing." Malik didn't respond. Tucker chuckled. Relax, pawn boy. It'll be quick. Malik sat down, adjusted his clock, folded his hands. The tournament director gave the nod. Clock started. Malik had white, and with it the first move. Pawn to e4. Quick, confident, standard at first glance. Tucker mirrored with e5. Matching. Predictable. The textbook way to begin. But what followed was anything but. Malik's second and third moves slashed into the opening like a scalpel. A variation so aggressive it left Tucker blinking, scrambling through memory. Within 4 moves, Malik had transitioned into a hyper-modern system. A blend of Queen's Indian and Catalan setup. Sharp, positional, and venomous. The kind of hybrid line that didn't show up in school tournaments. The kind that required hours of independent study. Not school-coached repetition. Tucker hesitated. He couldn't admit it, not with the entire school watching. But he didn't recognize the setup. Instead of adapting, he relied on arrogance. He pushed his knight forward recklessly. Malik countered. Fast. Clean. Every move delivered with silent intent. The audience grew quiet. They weren't used to seeing Tucker on the defensive. He shifted in his seat, suddenly sitting straighter, fingers tapping anxiously on the table. He pushed his bishop out early, hoping to rattle Malik into a hasty exchange. But Malik declined. He didn't just know what Tucker was trying. He'd seen it, beaten it, and buried it 100 times on his cardboard boards at home. Tucker's jaw tightened. 6 moves in, Malik's position was dominant. 8 moves in, he controlled the center. By move 12 he had forced Tucker into a cramped corner. Both knights locked behind pawns with no safe squares. People began to murmur. The tournament director looked uneasy. Coach Norris had left his chair. Tucker's confidence, built on years of being told he was exceptional, was starting to crack. He tried to bait Malik into a queen trade, a desperate bid to simplify the chaos Malik had created. But Malik dodged it masterfully, preserving tension while launching a kingside flank that nobody saw coming. Tucker's breath grew heavier. His hands trembled slightly now. He tried to mask it by leaning back, cracking his knuckles. Malik leaned forward. A move, a trap, a threat to Tucker's rook. Tucker saw it too late. His rook fell. Gasps swept through the crowd. That rook wasn't just a piece, it was a reputation. In that moment, Tucker wasn't Cressmore's golden boy. He was just a scared kid being dismantled in front of his entire world. He glanced at the judge, then at Coach Norris, as if silently begging for a bailout. None came. He tried to recover, moved his queen aggressively, forced an exchange. But Malik had been waiting for it. Move 19. Bishop pins Tucker's knight. Move 20. A passed pawn sprints forward. Move 21. Tucker trades down, hoping for air. Move 22. Malik checks. Move 23. Tucker blocks. Move 24. Checkmate, Malik said softly. No drama. No grand gesture. Just certainty. The room was frozen. Not a breath. Not a phone flash. Not even a whisper. Malik stood up. Tucker didn't. He stared at the board as if it had betrayed him. His face flushed red, jaw locked. Malik extended a hand. The universal gesture of sportsmanship, of victory and grace. Tucker didn't move, didn't look up, didn't even blink. The silence turned awkward. And then ugly. One parent in the second row muttered, "He's showboating." Another added, "Why would they even let him play? He's not part of the team." Spencer stood nearby, arms crossed, lips pursed. He didn't say it, but his face did. This isn't how it's supposed to go.
Malik let his hand fall.
He turned and walked off the stage. From the edge of the auditorium, Loretta clapped once, a single proud beat, before lowering her hands, eyes stinging with disbelief. Her son had just dismantled the school champion in 24 moves. No one congratulated him. No one spoke. But every student in the room would remember exactly what they had just seen, even if they'd spend the next few days trying to convince themselves it didn't happen. Tucker finally stood, eyes glassy, jaw twitching, and in front of the entire school, he muttered under his breath. As Malik walked away, "Next time I'll make sure you're not even allowed to sit at the table." The video didn't start with context. It started with shock. It showed 13-year-old Malik Jameson delivering a checkmate in 24 moves. It showed Tucker Dane, Cressmore's golden boy, frozen in disbelief, and it showed the silence that followed. A silence that said more than applause ever could. Someone had filmed it from the front row. Shaky hands, muffled whispers, a glimpse of the scoreboard in the background. Within hours, That clip was on every social media platform in Greenville. By morning it had been shared in chess forums across the country. Pawnboy trended first, as mockery, then as revelation. The first headline hit before breakfast. Black janitor's son. Shocks prep school tournament. Checkmate star student. Then came another. Prodigy or publicity stunt. Greenville Maid's son stuns privileged elite. By the second day, the video had 3 million views. And by the third, Malik's life no longer belonged to him. In the cafeteria, students whispered as he walked by. Not in admiration, in calculation. Some avoided him completely, afraid of being caught on camera with the viral kid. Others smirked, mimicking chess moves in the air, pretending to checkmate him in the hallway. He'd become a novelty, a headline without humanity. Even teachers treated him differently. Mrs. Elridge, his math instructor, who once ignored him entirely, now forced smiles and said, "You must be so proud, Malik. You've brought a lot of attention to the school." Attention, that was the word they used instead of trouble. The principal, Mr. Hadley, called him into the office that same afternoon. The walls were lined with trophies and certificates from years of Crestmore excellence. All names carved in gold, none of them his. Mr. Hadley sat behind his desk, fingers laced, tones syrupy and controlled. "Malik," he began, "you've certainly stirred quite a conversation." Malik sat still, eyes low. "This exposure," Hadley continued, "it's complicated. Some people think it's wonderful. Others—" He paused, glancing at the framed photograph of Tucker, shaking hands with the governor. "Others feel it's distracting from Crestmore's educational mission." Malik looked up slowly. "Distracting?" Hadley forced a smile. "You understand, son. The internet likes a good story. Rich school, working class hero. The whole thing. But these things can spin out of control. It's not always safe for people like you." "People like me?" Malik asked softly. Hadley blinked. "That's not what I meant." But it was. By the end of that week, the backlash had begun. Anonymous emails flooded the school board. "This is reverse discrimination. My son worked years to represent Crestmore. Now a janitor's kid gets the spotlight. Stop turning this school into a social experiment." Parents called it preferential attention. Students called it charity fame. And the journalists didn't help. They showed up during class hours, circling the campus gates with cameras, shouting questions through the fence. "Malik, did you train online? Did the school know you were this good? Does your mom really work here? Do you think your race helped your story go viral?" Loretta heard about it secondhand, through coworkers who whispered her name in the staff break room, pretending sympathy that wasn't real. When she arrived for her evening shift, she found a reporter waiting in the hallway, leaning against her cart. "Mrs. Jameson, just a few words?" he asked, holding up a mic. "How does it feel to have a prodigy for a son?" Loretta stiffened. "I'm at work," she said firmly, pushing past him. He followed. "Do you think Crestmore gave Malik a fair shot before this? Or are they trying to claim credit now that he's famous?" She turned, voice breaking. "You people didn't care when he was invisible. Don't start caring now that you can sell it." The clip aired that night anyway. Edited, stripped of context, twisted into drama. By morning, parents were calling for her dismissal. They said she'd embarrassed the school. Inside the classrooms, the racism turned quieter, but sharper. A teacher accidentally mispronounced Malik's last name during roll call. Students who once ignored him now smiled too wide, spoke too loud. "You're famous now, right?" One girl joked. "Guess cleaning floors pays off." Another whispered, "Bet he cheated. Someone must have coached him." The sting wasn't in the words, it was in how easily they were believed. Even the chess club, once proud to be mentioned alongside his name, began distancing itself. Coach Norris pulled him aside after class, arms crossed, face expressionless. "You've got talent, kid," he said. "But talent comes with responsibility. Don't let all this attention get to your head." Malik blinked. "I didn't ask for it." "Doesn't matter," Norris said flatly. "The school has an image to protect." There it was again. That word. Protect. Protect from what? From him? That Friday, an emergency PTA meeting filled the auditorium, the same one where Malik had made history just a week earlier. Parents took the microphone, one after another. "My son lost because of unfair publicity. This video makes our school look like some charity case. It's not about race. It's about standards." But every line about standards meant the same thing. This space was never meant for him. From the hallway outside, Malik listened through the door, unseen, unheard. He stood beside the janitorial cart, gripping its handle so tight his knuckles went white. Inside they were debating his worth, like it was policy. Loretta found him there, eyes hollow. "Baby, come home," she whispered. He didn't move. "They think I cheated." She looked away. "They're scared." "Of what?" Loretta sighed. "Of seeing you win." The next Monday, the school's official website posted a statement. Crestmore Academy celebrates excellence in all its forms. We believe in equality of opportunity, while maintaining academic integrity. The line sounded noble, but to those who knew, it was code. It was distance disguised as diplomacy. That night, Malik sat alone at their kitchen table, replaying the video that had changed everything. The same clip that once made him feel proud now felt like evidence, not of skill but of trespass. The comments beneath it told him what the world really saw. He's good for his background. Probably got help. Affirmative action in action. Let's see him beat a real player. He closed the laptop. The glow on his face dimmed to nothing. 2 days later, an email leaked. It was a message from Headmaster Hadley to a private donor, forwarded anonymously to the local paper. It read, "We are managing the situation with the Jameson boy carefully. The attention will fade. He's a lucky mascot. Nothing more." Without the internet's pity, this story would have ended in silence. The story hit the front page within hours. Crestmore tried to pull it down, citing privacy, but it was too late. Screenshots flooded social media. Alumni called the school's PR line. Students shared it in group chats, laughing, cringing, debating. For Malik, it wasn't shock. It was confirmation. Everything he suspected, laid bare in writing. The people who smiled in his face had been quietly planning his erasure from the start. Loretta found him sitting at the bottom of the stairwell that evening, email open on his phone. His expression empty. "Mom," he whispered, "they never wanted me to play." She knelt beside him, voice trembling. "Then we'll make them watch." That night, as lightning cracked over Crestmore's spires, Malik drafted a letter, not to the school, not to the press, but to someone much higher. The National Chess Federation. Silence wasn't new to Malik. He had grown up in its shadow, the kind that hummed in janitor closets, whispered through back hallways, and settled thick around voices not meant to be heard. For most of his life, Malik Jameson had been taught to observe and endure, speak when spoken to, listen more than you talk, and above all, never make trouble. But now they were making trouble for him. The email leak should have led to accountability. At any other school, it might have. But Crestmore was built on the myth of unshakable prestige. And when that myth cracked, they didn't apologize, they closed ranks. It started quietly. The chess team's next group photo didn't include Malik, though he'd won more public matches than anyone else that season. Then his name was left off the team roster submitted for the upcoming state scholastic championship. Malik found out not from the coach, not from an administrator, but from a friend who overheard it in the teacher's lounge. "Sorry, man," the boy whispered, eyes down. "They said you're not official team material." Malik tried to clarify. He wasn't asking for a trophy, or recognition, or even a spotlight. He just wanted to play. But when he approached Coach Norris, the response was as blunt as it was familiar. "We appreciate what you've done, Malik," the coach said, not meeting his eyes. "But this tournament has strict requirements. Only players with formal training and verified rankings can be submitted." "I've beaten every player on that team," Malik replied evenly. "And we respect that," Norris said, his voice tightening. "But this is out of my hands." Malik knew better. The school board issued a formal statement that afternoon. While Malik Jameson is a promising individual, the state requires consistent academic documentation and participation within an accredited chess curriculum. Unfortunately, Malik does not meet these guidelines. It was dressed up in rules and jargon, a polite way of saying he's too black, too poor, too untrained to be ours. But Malik wasn't just a quiet kid anymore. And he hadn't survived Crestmore by being naive. He knew things. He had receipts. For the past year, Malik had watched quietly as Coach Norris and team captains manipulated internal standings. He'd seen rating sheets adjusted by hand, before submission, heard parents whisper about private donations coincidentally timed with tournament invitations. He even remembered the name of a student who was gifted a seat at regionals despite losing 6 out of 8 matches. Malik had kept records, not to expose anyone, but to understand the game behind the game. Now they were trying to lock him out, so he decided to unlock the door himself. That night, he opened a private folder on his school-issued Chromebook, one he kept hidden behind innocuous file names like History Essay Draft. Inside were screenshots, emails, brackets, and practice logs that didn't match the official reports. He compiled notes, instances where students with legacy status were bumped up, and where others were quietly erased. Then came the hardest part, convincing someone to listen. He reached out to Miss Galvez, a former assistant coach, who had left Crestmore under mysterious circumstances. She'd once spoken kindly to him, even slipped him an old chess puzzle book during her final week. He wasn't sure she'd respond. She did. Her reply was short, but it lit a fire. "I believe you. Let's talk." The following week, Malik and Ms. Galvez met, after hours at a downtown library. She brought coffee, he brought evidence. Over 3 hours, they pieced together a timeline of selective advancement, favoritism, and borderline fraud, all masked under the pretense of maintaining prestige. She nodded slowly, as Malik laid it all out. "You know," she said, "if we go public with this, they'll come after you harder." Malik didn't blink. "They already are." When the school board caught wind of the meeting, someone had tipped them off. The response was swift. Malik was called into the principal's office the next morning. But this time, he wasn't offered a chair. Mr. Hadley stood behind his desk, arms crossed. "I understand you've been spreading accusations," he said. "I have evidence," Malik replied calmly. "You're a child," Hadley snapped. "You don't understand how damaging this can be to the school's reputation." Malik's voice didn't waver. "Maybe the reputation needs to be damaged." The silence between them was electric. Hadley walked slowly to the blinds, adjusting them even though they didn't need adjusting. "We gave you a moment, Malik. We allowed you to shine. But this isn't the path to success. You don't want to be remembered as the boy who ruined everything." Malik stepped forward. "No, I want to be remembered as the boy who told the truth." He walked out without another word. That afternoon, Miss Galvez submitted a formal complaint to the State Interscholastic Chess Committee, co-signed by 3 former staff members who had also left Crestmore under strained conditions. They confirmed Malik's claims, backed his records, and requested an independent review of the school's chess program. The district tried to spin it, calling the accusations a misunderstanding born from a student's frustration. But it was too late. The story had caught fire again. Only this time, it wasn't a feel-good rags to rook's tale. It was an exposé. The local news ran headlines like, "Crestmore accused of tampering with chess rankings, whistleblower is star player's son." And suddenly, Malik wasn't just a viral clip. He was a whistleblower. Days later, Malik received a letter, not through the school, but directly addressed to his home. It came in a sleek black envelope, gold trim, sealed with an embossed logo he didn't recognize. Inside was a letter from the Hudson Academy of Chess and Logic, one of the most elite national training institutes in the country.
Mr. Jameson,
"We have followed your progress and admire your resilience, talent, and integrity. We would like to extend an invitation for you to attend our summer youth mentorship program in New York City. All expenses covered. There is one condition: a final exhibition match against one of our academy's top-ranked juniors, to be held publicly." Malik read it twice, then a third time. His heart pounded, not with fear but with something else. For the first time in weeks, the path ahead wasn't closing. It was widening. But he also understood what this meant. This match wouldn't just be about strategy. It would be about proving, again, that a boy like him didn't need permission to belong. He handed the letter to his mother. Loretta read it slowly, tears welling in her eyes. "They're watching now," she whispered. Malik nodded. "Let them." 3 days later, the academy sent a name, the opponent Malik would have to defeat for entry. It was a face he recognized. Someone from his past. Someone who knew exactly how to make him lose. Not on the board, but with a whisper. The name on the announcement hit harder than any headline Malik had seen. Emily Carr, chosen as the district's sole youth representative for the upcoming National Scholastic Invitational in Washington, D.C. A single slot was open this year. One face to represent every student, every match, every victory the district had collected. The face they picked wasn't the one who'd beaten a Grandmaster. It wasn't the one who'd dismantled the school champion in 24 moves. It wasn't the boy who exposed a fraudulent system. It was her, Emily Carr, Crestmore's other outlier. Top-ranked girl, nationally recognized since 5th grade. Biracial, soft-spoken, sharp. She'd always floated between cliques, just enough edge to seem woke, just enough polish to be safe. And she was supposed to be a friend. From the beginning, she had been different. Or so Malik thought. While others whispered jokes behind his back, she'd offered him a seat during practice rounds. When his name first went viral, she messaged him privately. Proud of you. You deserve this. She was the one who said, they can't ignore talent forever.
But something had shifted.
After the email leak and the rising pressure on Crestmore, Emily had grown distant. She no longer nodded in the halls. No more messages. No more practice sessions together. At first, Malik thought it was the storm. Maybe she was avoiding controversy. Maybe she needed space. Then came the official district email. Subject line, congratulations to Emily Carr, District National Rep. No mention of Malik.
No explanation.
Just a silent erasure. That evening, Malik sat on the edge of his bed, the announcement open on his cracked phone screen. The words blurred in his vision. Loretta stood quietly in the doorway, towel over her shoulder, hands still wet from dishwater. She didn't even tell you? She asked. Malik shook his head slowly. I found out like everybody else. Loretta's jaw tightened. After everything, that girl. Malik cut her off gently. Don't, Ma, please, because he didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to believe that someone who once shared his silence, his isolation, had stepped into the very space he'd opened, without a word. The next day at school, he saw her by the library. Emily stood with a cluster of Crestmore's elite, the same boys who once laughed at Malik, Spencer Lowell, Jared Nguyen. They laughed now too, only this time with her. Malik walked up to her, quiet but direct. Congratulations, he said, trying to keep his voice even. She turned slowly, a flicker of guilt passing through her face. Thanks, she replied, voice soft. It's a big deal. I thought you were pulling out, he said. You told me you were stepping back from nationals this year. I was, she replied. Until they reached out, said it'd be good for optics. That the district needed someone media ready. Malik's eyes narrowed. And you didn't think to tell me? Emily looked around, as if searching for a way out. Malik, it's complicated. You've had a lot of attention. And after everything, the district's trying to balance things out. Balance, he repeated. You mean make it easier to digest? A little bit of color, but not too much. Her face tightened. That's not fair. No, he said quietly. What's not fair is watching someone walk through a door you helped break open, and then slam it behind them. Emily stepped back. I didn't ask for this. I just accepted it. That's the problem, he said, walking away. You always had the option. That night, Malik sat at his kitchen table, with a sheet of paper and a pen. He wrote every name he remembered from his matches, every player who'd been pushed ahead, every rumor whispered between rounds. He had a wall of facts, but none of it explained why Emily, of all people, had been chosen over him. Not until Dion, a junior player from a neighboring school, messaged him anonymously. You didn't hear it from me, but there's a list. It's not public, but it's how the district pre-selects reps before the season ends. Check the regional coordinator's files. Ask about media prep initiatives. A list. Malik's pulse quickened. He didn't know how he'd find it, but he had one advantage. Ms. Galvez. She still had connections in the regional chess committee, and more importantly, she still believed him. He forwarded the message. She replied within the hour. Give me 24 hours. The next afternoon, she called him from a blocked number. Malik, she said, I got it, but you need to see this with your own eyes. She met him after school at a coffee shop 2 towns over. No Crestmore logos. No eyes. Just an old man in the corner reading a newspaper, and a waitress who never looked up. She slid her laptop across the table. This was supposed to be internal only, she said, but someone left a shared drive link unprotected. On the screen was a spreadsheet, dates, schools, names, and next to each name, columns labeled ethnicity, media history, family background, appearance, public speaking rating, marketability score. Malik scanned down the list until he found it. Kerr, Emily. Her racial media proved speaks well, light-skinned, passes visual diversity standard. Selected. Jameson, Malik. Black, high-risk attention. Negative media coverage. Disruptive background, declined. He stared at the screen. Every breath in his chest went still. They never meant to let me in, he whispered. They let you in just long enough to sell the story. Galvez said, then replaced you with someone they could manage. Malik closed the laptop. His hands were shaking. Do you want me to leak this? She asked. No, Malik replied. Not yet. Why? Because I want to see how far they'll go pretending this is fair. Back at Crestmore, Emily caught him alone in the hallway. I heard you're meeting with the academy soon, she said, trying to sound cheerful. Yeah, Malik replied, monotone. They're lucky to have you. Malik didn't respond. She stepped closer. You're angry at me. He looked at her, eyes colder than she'd ever seen. I'm not angry, he said. I just stopped being surprised. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Because she knew she didn't have a defense, and neither did the system that chose her. Malik returned home that night, placed the printed spreadsheet on the kitchen table, and showed it to Loretta. She didn't cry. She didn't curse. She only whispered, they put your worth in a box before you ever sat at a board. He nodded. Then let's burn the box. Malik sent one email to a national journalist who had once asked for his story, attaching the spreadsheet with one subject line, how they choose winners. The first time Grandmaster Victor Lang visited Crestmore, he entered with the kind of arrogant poise only a man untouched by consequence could afford. The second time, he came as a shadow, not of himself but of a system that refused to crumble. The posters didn't say his name this time. There was no promotional fanfare, no red carpet of blinding flashbulbs, just a quietly scheduled special exhibition at the Crestmore Invitational Finals, presented in partnership with the Empire Chess Institute of New York, an elite club where young prodigies were molded into champions. Lang wasn't here to teach. He was here to recruit. But he'd also returned with something to prove. And someone to put Malik Jameson back in his place. His arrival sent ripples through the halls. The same players who once cheered for Malik now whispered with unease. They remembered how Lang had been made to look human, beatable, and how the boy who beat him was now the subject of controversy, backlash, and accusations. Lang didn't forget either, and he didn't come alone. Standing beside him as he entered the auditorium was a boy only slightly older than Malik, but built like the promise of everything the chess world wanted. Conrad Chase, blonde, sharp-jawed, the Ivy League bloodline, ranked nationally since age 9. His name floated through tournament circuits like legend. He was the kind of player sponsors lined up for, the kind who didn't need to be great, because he was already chosen. Lang introduced him as our future. He didn't mention Malik once. That morning, Malik stood outside the auditorium, staring at the event flyer posted to the double doors. Exhibition match, Empire Chess Institute versus Crestmore Select. Select. That word again. So deliberate, so political. There had been no public bracket, no sign-up, no invitation sent to Malik's home. Just a quiet assumption that if he came, he would know where to sit, or not to sit at all. It was Loretta who nudged him toward the doors. They brought you back in the shadows, she said, adjusting his collar, because they know you shine too bright under real lights. Malik nodded. I'm not afraid of him. I know, she said, but they're afraid of you. Inside the auditorium, the audience was smaller but sharper. No students with phones this time. Only sponsors, organizers, donors, faces in suits and tailored dresses. People who used chess as language and leverage, not passion. Lang stood at center stage, cool and pristine, one hand on Conrad's shoulder, like a general blessing his soldier. Today, he said into the microphone, you will witness not just skill, but structure. Not talent in a vacuum, but talent honed, refined, sharpened, disciplined. The jab wasn't subtle. Then he gestured toward the far end of the stage. And facing our student, we welcome Crestmore's own, Malik Jameson. A few polite claps followed. Brief. Hollow. Malik stepped forward, calm but alert, wearing a pressed button-down, and his mother's pride stitched into every breath. He took his seat, adjusted the clock, touched the board like it was sacred. Conrad sat across from him, smirking. Nice shirt, Conrad said, low enough that the mic wouldn't pick it up. Did they press that in the janitor's closet? Malik didn't respond. I heard you beat Lang, Conrad continued, voice still casual. Don't get used to it. He plays differently when the cameras are off. Malik folded his hands. That's too bad. I play the same either way. Lang stepped off to the side, giving a small nod. The timer blinked red. The match began. Malik opened with d4. Solid, aggressive. Conrad responded with the King's Indian defense. Sharp, dangerous. It was a calculated psychological move, the same defense Lang had used when he lost to Malik. A quiet message. This time, we'll do it right. The early game unfolded fast. Malik didn't hesitate. He played with speed and efficiency, cutting through Conrad's opening with positional clarity. Every move was precise, unapologetic. Conrad smirked less by move 8. Lang leaned in, whispering to a sponsor beside him. By move 12, Malik had sacrificed a pawn, not as a mistake, but as bait. Conrad took it. Malik countered with a diagonal thrust, pinning a knight and skewering his opponent's left flank. Whispers stirred. Malik wasn't just holding his own, he was winning. Then came the first shift. Conrad played bishop to g4, a trap buried deep in the archives. Malik hadn't seen it coming. For the first time in the match, he hesitated. Not because he didn't see the threat, but because he recognized it. This wasn't Conrad's strategy. This was Lang's. The same line he'd used on a Cuban prodigy at a tournament Malik had studied online at midnight 3 years ago. Lang was coaching him, move by move, from the sidelines. Malik looked up. Lang didn't meet his eyes. He simply adjusted his cufflink. Malik exhaled, then smiled, just slightly, because he remembered how that Cuban game had ended. He retreated, realigned, and within 4 moves, flipped the pressure back onto Conrad. By now, Conrad's breathing had changed. He clicked his pieces harder, tapped his knee under the table. Lang frowned. Another exchange, another trade. Malik now had a positional advantage. Not flashy, not dramatic, but lethal. That's when Conrad leaned forward, whispered without looking up. Go back to cleaning after the game. The words weren't just meant to sting, they were meant to break him. In front of the sponsors, in front of Lang, to remind him where they thought he came from. Malik didn't flinch. He moved his bishop, pinning Conrad's remaining rook against his king. Check. The room held its breath, but then an unexpected twist. Lang stepped forward, clearing his throat. Pause the match, he said. The referee blinked. Sir? Lang smiled tightly. A brief break. Conrad has a leg cramp. Medical allowance. The clock froze. Malik sat still. Conrad stood, flexing theatrically, leaving the board. Lang followed him off stage, hand on his back, lips close to his ear. Malik watched it unfold. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew what was happening. A mid-game adjustment. Illegal coaching under the guise of health. They weren't just trying to beat Malik. They were trying to outmaneuver him. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. When they returned, Conrad was smiling again. Lang looked smug. Malik adjusted his pieces and whispered to himself. They still don't think I belong. But belonging had never been his mission. He didn't want their chairs. He wanted the truth. On the board, the clock restarted. Conrad's next moves were different. Tighter. Cleaner. Too clean. Lang had rewritten the plan. Malik adapted, then countered. The game accelerated. Move 23. Conrad checks. Move 24. Malik deflects. Move 25. Malik sacrifices a pawn. Move 26. Conrad takes the bait, and realizes too late, it's a trap. Malik slides his rook into place. Double check. Gasps ripple through the gallery. Conrad's king is cornered. Lang's jaw tightens. The sponsors lean in. Malik doesn't blink. But as the final moves approach, Malik notices a judge whispering to Lang. And in that moment, he realizes, this game was never just about chess. It was about who gets to write the rules. The first time Grandmaster Victor Lang visited Crestmore, he entered with the kind of arrogant poise only a man untouched by consequence could afford. The second time, he came as a shadow, not of himself, but of a system that refused to crumble. The posters didn't say his name this time. There was no promotional fanfare, no red carpet of blinding flashbulbs, just a quietly scheduled special exhibition at the Crestmore Invitational Finals, presented in partnership with the Empire Chess Institute of New York, an elite club where young prodigies were molded into champions. Lang wasn't here to teach. He was here to recruit. But he'd also returned with something to prove, and someone to put Malik Jamison back in his place. His arrival sent ripples through the halls. The same players who once cheered for Malik now whispered with unease. They remembered how Lang had been made to look human, beatable, and how the boy who beat him was now the subject of controversy, backlash, and accusations. Lang didn't forget either, and he didn't come alone. Standing beside him as he entered the auditorium was a boy only slightly older than Malik, but built like the promise of everything the chess world wanted. Conrad Chase. Blonde. Sharp-jawed. Ivy League bloodline. Ranked nationally since age 9. His name floated through tournament circuits like legend. He was the kind of player sponsors lined up for, the kind who didn't need to be great, because he was already chosen. Lang introduced him as our future. He didn't mention Malik once. That morning, Malik stood outside the auditorium, staring at the event flyer posted to the double doors. Exhibition match, Empire Chess Institute versus Crestmore Select. Select. That word again. So deliberate. So political. There had been no public bracket. No sign-up. No invitation sent to Malik's home. Just a quiet assumption that if he came, he would know where to sit, or not to sit at all. It was Loretta who nudged him toward the doors. "They brought you back in the shadows," she said, adjusting his collar, "because they know you shine too bright under real lights." Malik nodded. "I'm not afraid of him." "I know," she said, "but they're afraid of you." Inside the auditorium, the audience was smaller, but sharper. No students with phones this time. Only sponsors, organizers, donors, faces in suits, and tailored dresses. People who used chess as language and leverage, not passion. Lang stood at center stage, cool and pristine, one hand on Conrad's shoulder, like a general blessing his soldier. "Today," he said into the microphone, "you will witness not just skill, but structure. Not talent in a vacuum, but talent honed, refined, sharpened, disciplined." The jab wasn't subtle. Then he gestured toward the far end of the stage. "And facing our student, we welcome Crestmore's own Malik Jameson." A few polite claps followed. Brief. Hollow. Malik stepped forward, calm but alert, wearing a pressed button down and his mother's pride stitched into every breath. He took his seat, adjusted the clock, touched the board like it was sacred. Conrad sat across from him, smirking. "Nice shirt," Conrad said, low enough that the mic wouldn't pick it up. "Did they press that in the janitor's closet?" Malik didn't respond. "I heard you beat Lang," Conrad continued, voice still casual. "Don't get used to it. He plays differently when the cameras are off." Malik folded his hands. "That's too bad, I play the same either way." Lang stepped off to the side, giving a small nod.
The timer blinked red.
The match began.
Malik opened with d4. Solid, aggressive. Conrad responded with the King's Indian defense. Sharp, dangerous. It was a calculated psychological move, the same defense Lang had used when he lost to Malik. A quiet message. This time, we'll do it right. The early game unfolded fast. Malik didn't hesitate. He played with speed and efficiency, cutting through Conrad's opening with positional clarity. Every move was precise, unapologetic. Conrad smirked less by move 8. Lang leaned in, whispering to a sponsor beside him. By move 12, Malik had sacrificed a pawn, not as a mistake, but as bait. Conrad took it. Malik countered with a diagonal thrust, pinning a knight and skewering his opponent's left flank. Whispers stirred. Malik wasn't just holding his own. He was winning. Then came the first shift. Conrad played bishop to g4, a trap buried deep in the archives. Malik hadn't seen it coming. For the first time in the match he hesitated. Not because he didn't see the threat, but because he recognized it. This wasn't Conrad's strategy.
This was Lang's.
The same line he'd used on a Cuban prodigy at a tournament. Malik had studied online at midnight 3 years ago. Lang was coaching him, move by move, from the sidelines. Malik looked up. Lang didn't meet his eyes. He simply adjusted his cufflink. Malik exhaled, then smiled, just slightly, because he remembered how that Cuban game had ended. He retreated, realigned, and within 4 moves, flipped the pressure back onto Conrad. By now, Conrad's breathing had changed. He clicked his pieces harder, tapped his knee under the table. Lang frowned. Another exchange. Another trade. Malik now had a positional advantage, not flashy, not dramatic, but lethal. That's when Conrad leaned forward, whispered without looking up, "Go back to cleaning after the game." The words weren't just meant to sting. They were meant to break him. In front of the sponsors. In front of Lang. To remind him where they thought he came from. Malik didn't flinch. He moved his bishop, pinning Conrad's remaining rook against his king. Check. The room held its breath. But then, an unexpected twist. Lang stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Pause the match," he said. The referee blinked. "Sir?" Lang smiled tightly. "A brief break. Conrad has a leg cramp. Medical allowance. The clock froze. Malik sat still. Conrad stood, flexing theatrically, leaving the board. Lang followed him off stage, hand on his back, lips close to his ear. Malik watched it unfold. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew what was happening. A mid-game adjustment. Illegal coaching under the guise of health. They weren't just trying to beat Malik. They were trying to outmaneuver him. 10 minutes passed, then 20. When they returned, Conrad was smiling again. Lang looked smug. Malik adjusted his pieces and whispered to himself, "They still don't think I belong." But belonging had never been his mission. He didn't want their chairs. He wanted the truth on the board. The clock restarted. Conrad's next moves were different. Tighter. Cleaner. Too clean. Lang had rewritten the plan. Malik adapted. Then countered. The game accelerated. Move 23. Conrad checks. Move 24. Malik deflects.
Move 25.
Malik sacrifices a pawn. Move 26. Conrad takes the bait and realizes too late, it's a trap. Malik slides his rook into place. Double check. Gasps ripple through the gallery. Conrad's king is cornered. Lang's jaw tightens. The sponsors lean in. Malik doesn't blink. But as the final moves approach, Malik notices a judge whispering to Lang. And in that moment, he realizes, this game was never just about chess. It was about who gets to write the rules. The mistake wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with a gasp or a groan. No alarm sounded. No one screamed. It was just one move. Move 2. Malik had been building a quiet but deadly position, pressing Conrad Chase deeper into a suffocating corner. But then, in a moment that would be replayed, freeze-framed and torn apart for days, he misread a defense. He pushed his queen too early. And Conrad pounced. With a calculated swing of his knight, Conrad captured Malik's bishop and simultaneously revealed a pin that trapped Malik's queen on an undefended diagonal. In 2 moves, the board flipped. The crowd shifted in their seats. Lang sat back in his chair, arms folded, the first smile of the match playing at the corner of his lips. From the back of the room, a sponsor whispered, "There it is." A few spectators clapped politely, unsure if it was appropriate. But sensing the turn, this wasn't just a counterattack. It was blood in the water. Malik felt it too. That cold gust of doubt, the kind that creeps in not through logic but through legacy. The kind that doesn't just question your move, but your right to be sitting there at all. He stared at the queen, now doomed to be lost. He'd seen blunders before, memorized them in silence. But this one was his, and there was no mop closet to hide in this time. Within seconds, the moment was clipped, recorded and uploaded. Malik cracks. Queen lost in match-turning blunder. Janitor's kid chokes under real pressure. From prodigy to pawn, troll accounts got busy. Photoshopped images appeared. Malik photoshopped kneeling beside a fallen queen. One meme showed his queen in a trash can. Another replaced his face with a mop. One tweet read, "He should have stayed on cleanup duty." The retweets stacked by the hundreds. Malik had made one mistake, and in that single breath, the world forgot the 26 perfect moves that came before it. In the crowd, Loretta's fingers tightened around her purse strap. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. But she felt the collective shift in energy, the quiet sigh of a room ready to see her son fall. And yet, Malik sat still, stone-faced. Inside, the pressure was boiling. But outside, he didn't blink. He touched the board with the same care as if nothing had changed. Because the board, for all its cruelty, was still honest. And the clock didn't care what the world said. It just ticked. He adjusted. Conrad, now emboldened, leaned into his chair and played faster. Cockier. Each move was aggressive, designed to remind the room that he was the real heir to this stage. That Malik had been a good story, but stories end. By move 30, Malik was on the defensive. Down material. Down morale. The audience began packing their emotions into polite resignation. A mistake had been made. A moment had passed. The prodigy would fade. But Malik wasn't playing for the crowd anymore. He was playing for clarity. He slowed his breathing. He replayed the mistake in his mind. Not to torture himself, but to learn, to adapt. Chess, after all, wasn't about being flawless. It was about recovering, with grace. And Malik knew recovery. He began building quietly on the queen's flank. Subtle repositioning, piece by piece. While Conrad celebrated with every aggressive swing, Malik was constructing something slower, deeper. But no one saw it. All they saw was the scoreboard, and the boy behind it, supposedly losing. Online, the mockery evolved. Live stream chats exploded. Queenless king. Did he even study openings? Bet lines letting Conrad win just to prove a point. A well-known Twitch streamer, analyzing the game mid-broadcast sighed dramatically, and said, "This is what happens when you elevate players before they're ready. Great story. Bad Even some of Malik's supporters faltered. One national chess blogger tweeted, "Sad to see him crumble under pressure. Maybe the hype came too fast." Back in the auditorium, Conrad caught the rising energy and pressed harder. He offered a rook trade that Malik declined, and the crowd took it as cowardice. But Malik wasn't retreating. He was baiting. Move 3. Malik pinned Conrad's rook with a knight, forcing an awkward reconfiguration. Conrad answered with an aggressive check. Malik moved. The position tilted again, barely. Then came move 3. Malik lifted his knight, his strongest remaining minor piece, and placed it in a vulnerable square. To the audience, it made no sense. He was already behind. Why throw away one of his last remaining pieces? Even Lang's brow furrowed. The move wasn't reckless. It was madness. Gasps filled the room. One woman in the second row whispered, "He's giving up." A father murmured, "Sad. He was doing so well." Conrad's eyes lit up. He captured the knight without hesitation. From behind the camera crews, a small boy watching the match turned to his father. But why'd he do that? His father didn't answer. Because no one knew. No one understood. Not yet. Malik's face didn't change. His hand went back to the table. His eyes stayed on the board. Only Loretta, watching from the shadows, caught it. The tiniest flicker of something in her son's expression. Not fear.
Not
Conviction. One move later, as the pieces shifted and Conrad reached to solidify his lead, his fingers froze, hovering inches above the board, as he realized the knight hadn't been a mistake. It had been a setup. The silence after Malik's knight sacrifice didn't last long, just long enough for Conrad's confidence to start crumbling. He hovered over the board, blinking, lips parting as if words might come to explain the shift. But they didn't. Because the moment he took Malik's knight, the structure he'd built, aggressive, proud, sharp, began to bend inward. To most, it had looked like a blunder. But the real move had come after. Malik's next step, pawn to f6, wasn't flashy. It wasn't even threatening on the surface. But it blocked Conrad's bishop. That single pawn turned the piece into dead weight, useless on a board that now needed precision. Lang sat straighter in his chair, hands no longer relaxed. He leaned forward. He saw it now, what Malik had seen 4 moves ago. The trap wasn't obvious. It was layered, complex, and it had teeth. Move 38. Malik activated his remaining rook, sliding it to the open file the knight had cleared. With Conrad's pieces tangled, the lane was wide open. Conrad hesitated. Too long. His fingers hovered, then withdrew. He knew if he moved his queen to counter, his king would be left exposed. If he castled a rare choice this late, he'd lose positional control. He was losing grip, not just on the game, but on the performance. The performance of being the golden boy. The unbeatable protege. The one hand picked by Lang himself. He chose wrong. Malik responded with rook to d7. A blunt, brutal threat. The board had changed entirely. Now, Conrad was the one scrambling to survive. Lang's expression soured. By move 42, Malik had cut off Conrad's remaining bishop and collapsed the center pawn structure. Every weakness in Conrad's position, every overreach he'd made during his flashy ascent, was now punishment. The audience no longer whispered. They watched in stunned silence. Even the commentators, streaming live to thousands, stumbled over their words. "Wait, this isn't defense," one said. "He's not surviving. He's winning." And then it happened. Move 44. Malik's rook forced Conrad's king into the far corner. The only escape was guarded by Malik's last pawn, the same one everyone had mocked for advancing too slowly. A pawn no one saw as dangerous. Until it became inevitable. Move 45. Malik advanced the pawn to the 7th rank. Now it sat 1 move away from promotion, and Conrad had nothing left to stop it. Lang stood. Slowly. Conrad's hand dropped from the board. "Checkmate is 2 moves away," the referee whispered to Lang. Lang didn't speak. He only looked at Malik. For the first time since their encounter months ago, the Grandmaster said nothing. Because there was nothing left to say. Malik's knight. The piece mocked as a desperate mistake had been the cornerstone of a masterpiece. The audience erupted, not in polite applause, but in awe. Reporters stood, photos snapped, sponsors leaned forward, mouths open. Loretta stood alone at the back, her eyes full, her hands trembling. She didn't cheer, she just whispered, "You did it, baby." Malik stood from the table, heart racing, chest tight. Conrad didn't shake his hand. He stood up, turned away, and walked off stage. Lang followed him, face stiff. But Malik remained, alone, and victorious. The next hour blurred. People tried to talk to him, analysts, coaches, photographers, but Malik heard none of it. He moved through the crowd like a ghost, eyes unfocused, because deep down, he still didn't believe they'd let this moment exist. Not for long. It was too much, too undeniable, too black, and too public. But for now, it was his. He found Loretta backstage, behind the curtain. She didn't say much, just wrapped her arms around him, like armor. And for the first time since the first piece moved, Malik let himself breathe. Then came the voice. "Mr. Jameson?" He turned. A man in a black suit, Crestmore's security badge clipped to his hip, stood with two others by the side exit. "We need a word, son." Malik blinked. "About what?" The guard hesitated. "There's been a development regarding your scholarship review." Malik's stomach tightened. "My what?" "The invitation to the Hudson Academy," the man said slowly. "It's being re-evaluated, due to external concerns." Behind him, another man, someone from the administrative board, stepped forward and handed Malik a folded letter. Loretta took it and read aloud. It was short, just 5 sentences. "In light of ongoing public scrutiny surrounding Mr. Jameson's online behavior and recent viral attention, the Academy reserves the right to pause final consideration of admission. We thank you for your demonstration today, but must maintain institutional integrity above all." Malik's mouth went dry. "What behavior?" he asked, confused. The man cleared his throat. "Some tweets. Old ones. Memes. Comments. It's not clear, but people are talking." Loretta stepped between them. "That's a lie. That's slander." The man shrugged. "The Academy has standards. They're allowed to protect their image." Malik looked down at the letter again. It didn't feel real. Just minutes ago, he'd played the game of his life. And now they were erasing him. Not because he failed, but because he succeeded too loudly. "What if I hadn't won?" he whispered to Loretta. She didn't answer. Because the answer was obvious. If he had lost, they wouldn't have needed to take anything away. Now that he had won, they had to. Outside, the cameras still rolled. The articles were already being drafted. But none of them knew yet that the system behind the game was already working to silence the boy who broke it. Malik looked at the man holding his scholarship review letter, then turned back toward the reporters waiting at the door, and walked directly into the spotlight, ready to tell them exactly what had just happened. It started with whispers, quiet at first, drifting through hallways and staff lounges like smoke. She was seen inside the chess room after hours. Loretta Jameson must have copied training files for her son. No way that boy got that good without someone helping him cheat. The smear campaign didn't need truth. It just needed volume. And after Malik walked off stage from the greatest game of his life, only to be slapped with a letter about external concerns, they found their next target, his mother. Loretta had been Crestmore's quiet backbone for nearly a decade. She'd worked holidays, stayed late when others went home, cleaned up after students who never learned her name. She had asked for nothing, except one thing, that her son be allowed to dream. Now the school turned on her like she was a problem to be handled. An anonymous email, unsigned, unverified, landed in the inbox of Principal Hadley. Subject: misconduct report. Loretta Jameson, custodial staff. The message accused her of breaching security protocols, of sneaking into locked faculty rooms to steal confidential training documents, and of orchestrating an online manipulation campaign to elevate her son's public image. There were no sources, no evidence, just venom in bullet points. But that was enough. By the next morning, Loretta's ID badge stopped working at the east entrance. By noon, her shift had been temporarily suspended pending internal review. By evening, her name was on a disciplinary docket, the same name her son had made famous. Malik found out when she didn't show up to pick him up from school. He called twice. No answer. When he got home, she was sitting on the couch, coat still on, a folded letter in her lap, Her eyes didn't meet his when he walked in. He stood frozen, watching her hands tremble. "Mom?" She looked up slowly, smiled like nothing was wrong. But he could see it. The exhaustion behind her lashes. "They've started an investigation," she said, as if reading a grocery list. "Said I accessed files I wasn't cleared for. Some parent accused me of helping you cheat." Malik sat down beside her, stunned. "What files? You don't even use a computer." "I know. Did you?" He stopped himself, even asking felt wrong. "Mom, this is insane." She finally looked at him. "They can't beat you on the board, Malik. So now they're trying to erase the reason you ever sat at one." By Friday, the whispers weren't whispers anymore. A local paper ran an anonymous tip piece titled, "Did Custodian Mother Bend the Rules for Her Chess Star Son?" The subtext wasn't subtle. One quote read, "Talent is real, but no one climbs that fast without a ladder." Malik's inbox flooded with hate. Teachers avoided eye contact. Students shared the article with laughing emojis in group chats. One kid made a fake Loretta training camp flyer and passed it around the cafeteria. Even Emily Carr, who once claimed to be his friend, said nothing. Ms. Galvez called late that night. Her voice was tight. "They're going after her now?" "They've paused her pay," Malik said. "They're saying she violated protocol. This is retaliation." He nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Can we stop it?" She hesitated. "You can't out-explain people who don't want to understand. You have to expose them." "How?" "There's something you don't know about Crestmore," she said. "Something I saw before I left." Saturday morning, Malik met her in the city archives downtown. She brought a folder thick with papers. "Years ago," she explained, "a donor gave money to Crestmore for a community outreach initiative. It was supposed to help underprivileged kids, like you, get real access to extracurricular programs. And they buried it. Rewrote the grant. Used it to renovate the chess room instead. Bought uniforms. Claimed it was for inclusion." Malik's stomach twisted. "So they had funding to train kids like me, and chose not to." Galvez nodded. "If we can prove that, we prove they were never interested in giving you a fair shot. That their outrage now is built on a lie." Malik knew what he had to do. He walked into school Monday morning, past stairs and Snickers, past the trophy case that now held a dusty photo of Conrad Chase, straight to Principal Hadley's office. The secretary tried to stop him, but he kept walking. Hadley looked up from his desk, eyes narrowing. "Malik, you can't just—" "I'm here about my mother," Malik said, voice steady. "I'm afraid that's under formal review." "I know," he replied. "That's why I brought her defense." He dropped the folder on Hadley's desk. Inside were scanned copies of the grant agreement, financial records, and program allocation sheets, all showing the funding was intended for outreach, not renovations. Hadley opened it slowly, scanning the top page. His lips parted, but no words came. "There was never a breach," Malik said, "just buried guilt." "You don't understand the pressure." "I understand exactly what you did," Malik interrupted. "You couldn't discredit me, so you went after the woman who raised me. You want the story without the source, the trophy without the truth." Hadley stood, his voice low and icy. "You're playing a dangerous game, son." Malik didn't move. "No, I'm playing yours. I just happen to be better at it." Then from behind the door, a second voice chimed in. "Mr. Hadley, that'll be enough." A tall man in a navy suit entered the room, followed by a woman holding a legal briefcase. Malik blinked. The man extended a card. "Mr. Patel, with the State Board of Education Legal Compliance Office. We received an anonymous tip last week, and after some digging, we discovered your school has a long-standing history of misappropriating educational funds and retaliating against certain families." Hadley's face drained of color. The woman beside him placed a document on the table. "Loretta Jameson's employment record. Spotless. You're going to reinstate her immediately." "And what about Malik?" Hadley asked, voice dry. Patel glanced at Malik. "He doesn't need you anymore." As Malik stepped out of the office, victorious but shaken, his phone buzzed. A new email from the Hudson Academy board. The subject line read, "Final review decision, status revoked." They didn't call it a threat. They called it a settlement option. A quiet email arrived in Malik's inbox the morning after the confrontation with Principal Hadley and the visit from the state legal compliance officers. The tone was formal, wrapped in legalese and corporate courtesy, but the core message was crystal clear. In the interest of de-escalating ongoing reputational strain, we propose a mutual withdrawal from tournament participation. Should this not be accepted within 72 hours, the board will proceed with its investigation into Loretta Jameson's conduct, which may result in revocation of her access to campus grounds. 3 days. Not to defend himself, not to explain the corruption, the lies, the sabotage. 3 days to erase himself or watch the one person who had stood by him through everything lose everything. Malik stared at the screen for a long time, then closed the laptop. That evening, Loretta found him hunched over a stack of papers in their living room. Old tournament rosters, Crestmore newsletters, dusty binders filled with event programs. Every detail he'd ever collected in silence, now weaponized into survival. She didn't interrupt. She just placed a plate of food beside him and sat quietly across the table. After a few minutes, Malik finally spoke.
I think they've been doing this for years.
Doing what? Rewriting. Covering. Naming their winners before the games ever started. Loretta exhaled. So this was never about you. He shook his head. It was never just about me. Day 1. Malik skipped class. He spent the day in the school library, accessing the backlogs of Crestmore's internal chess rankings. The librarian tried to turn him away until he mentioned he was working on an archival grant project, a lie that felt painfully close to the truth. Inside the archives, he pulled every file from the last 5 years, every bracket, every roster, and one thing became clear. Certain names, almost all white, almost all children of board members or donors, appeared on tournament submissions, even in years when their scores didn't merit it. Meanwhile, others, players of color, scholarship students, even faculty kids, were buried in alternate logs. Ghost participants, fabricated statistics. One sheet even showed a duplicate of the same tournament match, 2 different outcomes submitted to different authorities. Malik scanned everything, his flash drive filled by the hour. Day 2. He dug deeper. A former maintenance worker at Crestmore, a man named Tyrone Ellis, had once told Loretta about a hidden camera installed in the chess room for safety. The footage was never shared publicly, but if it was stored somewhere, it might prove what really happened in key matchups, and what did. With help from Miss Galvez, Malik accessed the school's aging security system. What he found wasn't just evidence, it was revelation. Clips from the past 3 years showed students being coached mid-match by staff, adults whispering in their ears, papers handed across tables, tournament directors looking the other way. And in one grainy clip from 2 months ago, Loretta herself walking through the chess room during her night shift. Not stealing, not scanning, just wiping down tables. She never touched a document, never even paused at the computer desk. The timestamp aligned perfectly with the date mentioned in the anonymous email that accused her of misconduct. The lie was surgical, and now it had a timestamp. Malik backed up the footage to a separate drive. He labeled it, 3 Witnesses Truth.
Day 3.
Malik didn't sleep the night before. He printed copies of all key documents, created a presentation, practiced what he'd say. He knew what he was walking into. A boardroom filled with polished people, all of them ready to spin anything into policy concerns or procedural missteps. He dressed in a navy shirt Loretta had pressed the night before, not to impress them, but to show them he didn't need to wear a uniform to deserve respect. At 3:01 p.m. sharp, he stood outside the Crestmore Board of Governors conference room, a space he'd never been invited into, until now. A secretary opened the door. 12 faces turned toward him. Mostly white, mostly older, all unreadable. Principal Hadley sat at the far end, eyes cold. "Mr. Jameson," said the chairwoman, a woman with thin glasses and a voice trained to neutralize outrage. "We understand you've requested to present materials before we proceed with administrative actions." Malik stepped forward, a flash drive in one hand, folder in the other. "No," he said. "I'm not here to request. I'm here to correct." He plugged the drive into the projector, opened a slide deck labeled Crestmore: The Cost of Silence. Page by page, he walked them through, side-by-side charts showing manipulated tournament submissions, screenshots of emails discussing desirable optics for national reps, surveillance footage of Loretta working innocently on the night she was accused, clips of white players receiving in-match coaching. The room grew quieter with every slide. One board member cleared his throat, visibly sweating. Another whispered to her colleague, then quickly looked away when Malik caught her eye. When he finished, he placed one final document on the table. The original grant agreement meant for underprivileged outreach. This school was paid to include us, he said, voice calm. Instead, you built barriers, and when someone climbed over them, you tried to burn the ladder behind him. Hadley leaned forward, trying to reclaim the room. Even if your mother didn't breach protocol, your behavior— Stop, Malik said firmly. You don't get to talk about behavior. Not when you've built an entire program on exclusion. A long pause. Then the chairwoman cleared her throat. We'll need time to review. No, Malik said, cutting her off. You've had years. I've had 3 days. I just gave you the truth. You want more time? That's not review, that's retreat. He reached into his backpack, pulled out 2 envelopes. This one, he said, holding up the first, is a copy of all the evidence. Already emailed to the regional board and the state ethics office. He lifted the second. This one is a letter from the lawyer representing the families of 3 former students who were denied advancement under your selection process. One of them's already talking to the press. The board froze. Malik looked directly at Hadley. You wanted me to walk away in silence. But I don't play for silence. He took a breath. I play for people like my mother, and I don't resign. As Malik turned to leave, the chairwoman's voice stopped him. Wait, before you go, she said, her tone hesitant, eyes darting toward Hadley. Can we discuss a possible reinstatement to the national circuit? If you'd consider returning to represent Crestmore. There were no clocks ticking in this match. No rooks, no knights, no bishops sliding into place. Only a long wooden bench. A silent gallery. A judge seated high above a polished seal of the state of South Carolina. This was Malik's final game. Not on the board, but in a courtroom. And unlike chess, there were no rules his opponents hadn't already bent. It began with a video, clipped from a live stream, circulated by a small but vocal advocacy group. Malik's voice, calm but fiery, standing before the Crestmore School Board, exposing corruption, bias, and betrayal. The clip ended with one sentence that lit a fire across the internet. I play for people like my mother, and I don't resign. In 24 hours, the video racked up over 1 million views. By 72 hours, national outlets had picked it up. CNN, Vox, NPR, civil rights lawyers took notice. One group, the Education Equality Legal Alliance, reached out to Loretta and Malik directly. They weren't just interested in Malik's exclusion. They had received multiple complaints from other families, black and brown students who had been quietly passed over, benched or redirected out of Crestmore's competitive pipelines. Some didn't even know it had been happening until they saw Malik's testimony. 2 weeks later, a class action lawsuit was filed. Jameson v. Crestmore Preparatory Academy and Greenville County School District. Allegations included racial discrimination in extracurricular program placement, financial misuse of federal outreach grants, retaliation against whistleblowers, reputational sabotage. Crestmore responded with polished statements and rehearsed denial. We deny all allegations. We remain committed to diversity and excellence. We look forward to clearing our name. But behind closed doors, they were panicking. The district's legal team reached out with a quiet offer, a settlement.
$200,000 in damages.
Immediate reinstatement to Hudson Academy's scholarship. Public apology. Non-disclosure agreements all around. Most people would have accepted. Loretta didn't speak for a long time after the offer came. Then, without looking up, she asked Malik, "What do you want to do?" He answered without hesitation, "Tell the truth, out loud, where they can't edit it." They refused the money. They refused silence. They chose the courtroom. The trial opened in Greenville County Courthouse. Courtroom. Malik and Loretta sat side by side. He wore a navy suit, not new, borrowed, and the same calm expression he wore across the chessboard. Loretta held a notepad in her lap. She never wrote a single word on it. Across from them sat Principal Hadley, flanked by Crestmore's attorneys and board representatives. One of them was the same woman who once offered Malik reinstatement, as if silence was something he could wear like a uniform. The courtroom filled with press, alumni, students, and strangers who had come just to watch history unfold. Opening statements began. The district's lawyer painted Malik as a spirited but misguided young man who misunderstood administrative processes. He called the allegations an unfortunate series of miscommunications amplified by internet attention. He described Loretta as passionate but uninformed about academic policy. Then Malik's lawyer stood and told the story, from the janitor's closet, to the first checkmate, to the fabricated misconduct. to the erased tournament logs, to the flash drive, to the email leak, to the whispers that nearly ruined them. When he sat down, the room was breathless. The testimonies began. Former students took the stand. One, a Latino student named Miguel Torres, described being removed from Crestmore's chess program after he began outperforming legacy players. Another, a girl named Jaya from Crestmore's feeder school, testified that her application to the gifted program was returned with missing documentation. Documents her mother swore she had submitted twice. Ms. Galvez testified for 2 full hours, presenting the grant records and video footage. When the district's lawyer tried to discredit her by pointing out her termination from Crestmore, she responded, "Yes, I was pushed out after I told the truth." Then it was Malik's turn. He stood at the witness podium, under oath, with every camera in the room turned toward him. "What does this case mean to you?" his lawyer asked. He looked at the judge, the jury, the back row where Loretta sat, still clutching the same silent notepad. "This isn't about me," Malik said. "I was a symptom, not the cause. I played because no one thought I could. I studied because no one ever offered to teach me. I won because I had to. Not because I was invited, but because I refused to stay invisible." "And your mother?" the lawyer asked. He swallowed. "She gave me everything. Dignity, focus, discipline. She never asked for a spotlight, just a fair shot, and they tried to take that from her, because they couldn't find anything wrong with me." Silence. The district's lawyer didn't ask him a single question. Then Loretta was called. She walked slowly to the stand, wearing a black dress and the same shoes she wore to her night shift. Her voice trembled at first. "They said I stole," she began. "Said I slipped into rooms I cleaned for years. Said I cheated for my son. I didn't even know the rules. But I knew what I saw." She looked directly at the jurors. Doors weren't made for boys like mine. So when he opened one, they tried to say it didn't count. Closing arguments came and went. Crestmore pleaded for context. The Jamesons demanded accountability. A judge gave the jury one night, and the nation waited. Social media lit up. Hashtags like "Chin Stand with Malik" trended. News panels debated whether this case was about race or process. Opinion pieces flooded the internet. Hudson Academy, now publicly embarrassed, released a new statement. "We regret how certain procedural concerns were handled." But Malik stayed offline. He sat in the quiet of their small apartment, replaying lines of defense and counterattacks not on a board, but in his memory. Loretta made him tea. Neither of them slept. The next morning, courtroom 3B filled again. The judge returned, face unreadable. A bailiff handed her the folded paper. Malik stared straight ahead. No twitch. No breath. No flinch. The judge unfolded the verdict slowly. She cleared her throat. "In the matter of Jameson Visa Crestmore Preparatory Academy." The room held its breath. This court finds in favor of the plaintiffs." The judge's voice echoed across the courtroom, like the final click of a chess piece dropped onto a checkmated board. For a few seconds, it didn't feel real, just air and silence, and heat. Then the gallery erupted. Gasps. Claps. A choked sob from someone in the back. Journalists rushed to capture the moment. Camera flashes burst like lightning. Malik didn't smile. He didn't pump a fist or look for a spotlight. He simply reached for his mother's hand. Loretta, who had sat quiet and invisible on too many school benches, squeezed his fingers with a trembling grip. Her other hand wiped away tears she hadn't planned to cry. All her life, she had taught him to fight with dignity, and now, that dignity had fought back. In full view of the world, the judgment was comprehensive. The court not only sided with the Jamesons, it issued a damning summary judgment against Crestmore Preparatory Academy and the Greenville County School District for systemic bias, retaliatory conduct, and intentional obstruction of equitable access to educational advancement. Within 72 hours, Loretta Jameson was reinstated, with full back pay and a formal apology from the district. Principal Hadley resigned, his severance revoked under cause for misconduct. The Crestmore chess program was suspended pending audit, and its prior state trophies placed under investigation. And most shockingly, Grandmaster Victor Lang, after evidence of improper coaching surfaced in court, issued a public apology, stating, "I underestimated the strength of a player I never took the time to truly see. That was my greatest error." It was printed on the front page of Chess Monthly. Below it, a photo of Malik, calm, focused, unshaken, seated at the board where it all began. But that was just the beginning. Scholarships began arriving before Malik had even left the courtroom steps. Harvard, MIT, Morehouse, Stanford, Howard. The U.S. Chess Federation offered him a mentorship grant. And even ESPN requested a documentary interview. He declined most interviews. The world wanted a symbol. Malik wanted peace. But one gesture, one decision, they couldn't ignore: the stage at Crestmore, the same stage where Lang had smirked and called him a joke, the same floor where Tucker had refused to shake his hand, was officially renamed the Malik Jamison Hall of Dedication. And beneath the school crest, a new plaque was installed, in honor of the unseen who taught themselves to play, and taught the world to watch. Loretta cried again when she saw it. But this time, so did others. He saw Tucker once, in line at a college chess qualifier in Atlanta. Tucker looked older, tighter around the jaw, the weight of a narrative no longer protected. He saw Malik and nodded once, stiffly. Malik nodded back. Nothing else needed to be said. Tucker had once called him Pawn Boy. Now he had to list Malik's name on every application that asked who had beaten him. Emily Carr wrote Malik a letter. Not a text. Not a DM. An actual letter folded and hand-delivered by a mutual acquaintance. She wrote, "You were right. I accepted the door they opened for me. Even when I knew you built the hallway, I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted to say thank you for speaking when I chose to stay silent." Malik didn't respond. Some endings didn't need punctuation. And then there was Conrad Chase, the golden protege, Lang's legacy, now unraveling under scrutiny. After the trial, footage of his whispered insult, "Go back to cleaning after the game," had gone viral. Public support evaporated. His reputation, once pristine, fractured. He lost his place in the Empire Chess Institute. Sponsors dropped him. He disappeared from rankings by the fall. No press release. No farewell match. Just silent. Malik never celebrated his downfall. He just kept playing. The real victory wasn't the verdict. It was the shift, in conversation, in curriculum, in who was allowed to be seen. Malik began visiting schools around Greenville, offering free strategy sessions for inner-city chess clubs. He never charged. He didn't wear a name tag, or make kids call him Mr. Jameson. He just showed up, taught. Listen. One afternoon, a small girl with braids asked him, "Did they really try to stop you just 'cause your mama cleaned stuff?" Malik looked her in the eyes. "Yes," he said, "but I kept going because she cleaned everything, and never let anyone make her feel small for it." Then came the news no one expected. A letter from the World Youth Chess Federation arrived, inviting Malik to represent the U.S. in their Global Mind Games exhibition in Switzerland, a showcase of young minds from underrepresented communities across the world. Malik hesitated. He stood at the edge of a new chapter, more visibility, more scrutiny, more pressure. But this time, he wasn't alone. He handed the letter to Loretta. She read it twice, hands steady. "You ready?" she asked. Malik looked at the door behind him, the hallway ahead, and the light breaking through the morning window. "I'm ready." But before accepting, Malik asked for one condition. He wrote directly to the Federation president. "I will represent the United States if my mother can stand beside me on that stage, just as she stood beside me when the lights were off and no one believed in my name." The Federation agreed. That photo, Malik standing with Loretta at the opening ceremony, draped in a U.S. flag, her uniform replaced with an elegant navy dress, became the most shared chess image of the decade. A symbol not of pity, but of earned respect. Yet despite all this, despite the court win, the press, the honor, the victory, Malik had already decided what came next. Weeks after the Switzerland exhibition, as offers continued to flood in, Malik gathered the press for a live announcement, and stunned the nation when he said, "I'm turning it all down." The auditorium was packed again. Reporters lined the back wall, notepads ready. Photographers crouched for the perfect angle. Lights from camera crews bounced off polished floors. Only this time, the attention wasn't for a match. It was for an announcement. Malik stood at the podium, in a crisp, simple gray button-down, no academy crest, no sponsor logos, just himself. He looked older, sharper around the jaw, but his voice still carried the same calm it had when he made his first move in silence, years ago. Behind him stood Loretta, her hand on his shoulder. To his left was a display screen, one slide on loop, a rendering of a small building with clean glass windows and a simple gold plaque. the Loretta Jameson Center for Chess and Character. The room hushed as Malik leaned into the mic. Thank you all for being here, he began. It's been a long road, and I know many of you are here expecting me to announce which offer I'm accepting. Which Ivy, which title, which federation. Nods from the audience. Smiles. He continued. I'm not here to do any of that. He paused. Let the moment breathe. I'm here to say I'm turning it all down. Gasps. Chairs shifted. A reporter's camera flashed prematurely. Malik's voice didn't waver. I'm turning down every scholarship, every professional sponsorship, every international circuit invitation. A second pause.
Then,
Because while the world kept asking what I wanted to achieve, no one stopped to ask what I wanted to change. The backlash was immediate, online and off. Wasted potential. He's throwing away opportunity. Is this some sort of protest? But Malik wasn't protesting. He was planting something. In the weeks following the press conference, a quiet construction crew began renovating an abandoned community center in East Greenville, 3 blocks from the apartment where Malik grew up. Every Saturday, Malik showed up with a toolbox and paintbrush, working alongside retired volunteers, former classmates, and kids from the neighborhood. He didn't wear gloves. He didn't hide behind a title. By the end of the second month, the inside was transformed. 5 tables, 10 boards, 30 chairs, each one second-hand, but clean, polished, welcoming. A mural spanned the back wall. It showed a young black boy reaching up to move a chess piece, the queen, while adults in the background blurred into shadows. At the top of the mural, in bold hand-painted script, were Loretta's words. No dream is too heavy to carry, if someone shows you how to lift it. Opening day came quietly. No cameras. No ribbon-cutting ceremony. Just Malik at the door with a notebook and stack of sign-in sheets. He wasn't looking for prodigies. He was looking for the invisible ones. The ones who sat quietly in classrooms, scribbling strategy in the margins of worksheets. The ones who couldn't afford camps or coaches. The ones told not your lane before they even touched the pieces. At first, a few parents were skeptical. You're really doing this for free? Malik nodded. And it's not a gimmick? No one's trying to recruit my son? No, he'd say, just trying to give him what I never had. By month 4, over 50 students were enrolled. Kids came from all over. Some on city buses, some walking from shelters, some dropped off by grandmothers in borrowed cars.
They came for the strategy.
They stayed for the safety, because Malik didn't just teach chess. He taught confidence. He made them believe that thinking ahead, in a world that rarely gave them that luxury, was a form of power. A journalist from The Atlantic came to observe one day. After watching a 9-year-old girl outplay a 14-year-old boy in a tense 5-minute blitz match, she turned to Malik and asked, "Why here? Why now?" Malik didn't flinch. Because too many kids like her never get past the first move, he said. They're labeled early, pushed aside, and if you never sit at the board, you never learn what it means to fight smart. You never know how powerful it feels to win by outthinking someone who counted you out. A documentary team followed the center's first year. They expected to capture transformation. What they captured instead was quiet revolution. A boy who'd been suspended twice for behavioral outbursts became the region's top junior analyst. A girl who had never spoken above a whisper learned to call checkmate without apology. Parents cried in hallways. Teachers wrote letters. Donors started to take notice. Not to own the moment, but to ask how they could build more like it. The documentary was picked up by Netflix. It was called The First Move. It opened with a simple line. He could have taken everything, but he chose to give it all away. Malik's book came later. A quiet memoir. No ghostwriter. No celebrity forward. Just his words. It was titled Pawn Boy. Not as a badge of shame, but as a reclaiming. Inside he detailed every turn. The racist jokes. The digital lynching. The stage humiliation. The silence of allies. The courtroom tension. And the opening no one saw coming. The book spent 12 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. But for Malik, the real victory was seeing a boy at the chess center, maybe 10, maybe 11, pull it from his backpack one afternoon and say, "Mr. Jameson, you signed this." Malik smiled. "You read all of it?" The boy nodded. "Twice." "Why?" "Because you look like me." Years passed. The center grew. Chapters opened in 2 more cities. Loretta retired with dignity, her final paycheck framed above the front desk. And Malik, still young, still calm, still never wearing a suit, unless absolutely required, kept showing up. Every morning. Every match. Every first move. The world had crowned him early. The headlines had called him the future of American chess. But Malik had never wanted to be the future of a game that hadn't been built for boys like him. He wanted to be the architect of a new one. One where kids didn't have to outsmart centuries of exclusion just to prove they belonged. One where no mother had to mop a floor just to keep her child close enough to dream. One where the smartest move wasn't about checkmate, but about showing others how the game was played in the first place. One move changed everything. What would you have done if they laughed at you too? No one should have to beg to be seen. Not in a hospital, not in a courtroom, not anywhere. If this story made you pause, even for a second,